So 710 ends our chapter. We're on word problems. So there's three types. Type 1, I tell you the area of a rectangle, and I tell you something about the sides. So I have an area of a rectangle is 96. The length is 4 more than the width. And I'm asking you to find the dimensions, plural, meaning I want two answers back. I want a length and I want a width. Anybody have a suggestion of something that might be a good idea if we're talking about rectangles? Draw a rectangle, I think, would help us feel a little bit more settled and organized. So here comes my rectangle. Where's area on shapes? Is that the around it or the in it? That's the in it. So there's like 96 squares or 96 tiles to cover this rectangle, but 96 is the inside sort of number. It doesn't really matter which one you call the length. I think more people probably think of this as the length, but when you're dealing with a rectangle, like, it's still the rectangle. It doesn't really matter which one is the length and which one is the width, because rectangles are pretty turnable. But if we don't know what any of the sides are, but we know that one is 4 more than the other, how can we somehow label those?
Some x plus 4.
Somebody's x plus 4, and somebody else is then just an x. So somebody to be an x. I'm going to make that one be my x, because that's the shorter looking one to me. I'll make that one x plus 4, because that's the longer looking one to me. That's one perfectly good way to like describe what that is with math symbols. Question about that? Also perfectly good, but probably harder. I could have called this one, the long one, x, and then what would the shorter one have been?
X plus 4.
No. X minus 4. So somebody's got to be x. And then if there's 4 difference, somebody's got to either add 4 or subtract 4. But I think you'd rather add than subtract. So that's probably the more natural way to do it. Question about that concept? Okay, so then how do we do area? Okay, so if we're looking at the shape and we know how high it is and we know how wide it is and we know what the area is, how do those facts fit together? How do you do areas of shapes? Multiply one times the other. So to create a problem, we would want x to multiply x plus 4, and it should equal 96. And that's what made today's new. Now it's just doing stuff we've done before. But the x wants to multiply an x plus 4, and it should equal the number they gave us. Something about that. What do your algebra instincts tell you to do to that? Distribute. And you'd be correct. What do you think they're distributing?
X squared plus 4x.
X squared plus 4x. We don't want it to equal 96 forever, so I might as well solve that issue at the same time. Using yesterday's skills, what did we want everything yesterday to equal? 0. So how would I get that 96 out of there? I would subtract it out. Then whether that's there like yesterday or whether that's gone like it has been all chapter, we have 3 terms. What have we been doing all chapter? Factor. So let's factor x. If that's a minus, we're different. And then we're taking it into your edges of your times tables. Multiply to 96, but subtract 4.
12 and 8.
12 and 8. Who's going where?
12's positive.
12's positive.
8's negative.
8's negative. We've been doing that for weeks now. Question about the factoring. And then we did this yesterday. This tells us that the x would be negative 12. This tells us the x would be 8. And if it were yesterday, we'd stop. Those would be our 2 answers, and we'd cut out. We're not quite done, because word problems, you always have to go back and make like some kind of an interpretation. Question about those. Think to our rectangle now. Can the side of a rectangle be negative 12?
No.
No, you can't have negative rectangles. So that answer is a throwaway. Most negative answers today will be throwaways. Could the side of a rectangle be an 8?
Yes.
Yes. In which case, the other side of this particular rectangle that's 4 more would have to be
Positive 12.
positive 12. So what we're going to get for our answers would be a positive 8 and a positive 12. Almost always, and I don't know why other than God created math and God is smart and math works. Almost always, the negative answer that you try to throw away will find a way through the creation of this story to resurrect itself in positive form. Like, we ditched out this negative 12 because rectangles can't be negative, but then this 8, whose friend is 4 more, like, brings the 12 back to us in positive form. That's not luck, that's not coincidence, that's like gonna happen on a lot of these questions. And I can't really explain to you why other than what I just said. Like, God created math and it works. My take on it. Question about that one? So if they tell you the area and they tell you something about length-width relationships, there's a couple in the homework that they're going to do just that. Here's a different style. Area rectangle is again told to you is 120, but instead of telling you something about length and width directly, they're going to talk to you about the perimeter being 44. Does it still feel helpful to draw a rectangle?
Yeah.
I'd say yeah. So I'm going to go rectangle. Where's the 120 live?
Inside.
Inside is like where the 120 is. What's the perimeter about?
The outside.
It's adding the whole outside. So if I say that this one is an X, because I have no idea what that is, can anybody figure out a way to explain to me what this one would be somehow? If you can, you're pretty clever. If you can't, I'll drop you a hint in a second. No, we need to use an X again. We can't, if we do 2 letters, you can't do anything with that as an Algebra 1 student. Algebra 2, we're going to get around to having like 2 variables at a time, but like right now, we just can't manage that. Anybody a way to do this? Like, it's similar, it's not super dissimilar to, here we had an X, and then this had some like X-y stuff, just the 4 was very readily available and apparent. This is an X, this is gonna be some kind of X-y stuff, somehow the 44 is like in there, but not really, so don't start yelling like X plus 44 or X minus 44 or anything about 44, because that won't do
Do we have to
it.
like divide something
I'll say maybe,
with, do we have to get a number from the 44?
yes,
11.
yeah, no.
Is it X divided
So let's think back to 7th grade days. Okay, so if I gave you that rectangle and I asked you to try to get a perimeter out of there, what number would you probably pass through on your way to getting the actual perimeter?
1?
Let's try this. What is the actual perimeter?
28.
Yes. I don't know if you landed on 28 directly. I don't. I passed through a number on my way to 28. First of all, how's it 28? Did anybody think of a different number?
10 plus 18 is 28.
Yeah, where'd you get a 10 from?
5 times 2.
Okay, so there's like 2 of these 5s,
2 of the 9s.
and there's 2 of those 9s.
You have to add them all up.
You have to add them all up, but I don't add them all up. I don't add up 5, 5, 9, and 9. I pass through another number.
18.
No.
14.
Yes. Where'd 14 come from?
5 and 1.
This and this make 14. If I know that this and this make 14, I know that the other unlabeled stuff would have to be another 14. So when I add up 2 of them to get to 14, I know I'm on my way to 28. But 14 is halfway to 28. So if you tell me perimeter is 44, what that tells me is if I'm only going to label 2 of the sides, the 2 labeled sides don't make 44, the 2 labeled sides make 22. So what we're looking to do is something with a 22 and an X. This is an X. This has something to do with getting us closer to 22. Can anybody do that now? It's still pretty clever.
Is it X divided?
It's not.
X times something?
It's like our cookies. So if I said I had 10 cookies, and I gave 3 to one student, I would be giving 7 to the other kid.
22 plus 1.
If I had 10 cookies and I gave X to one of you, the other one would get
X.
Minus 10. 10 minus
X
10.
10 minus X. If I had 12 cookies and I did Y to a friend, the other friend,
12 minus
12 minus Y. I have 22 inches to give away of perimeter-ish stuff. And X went to who I labeled already,
X minus
22 minus
22 minus X. This problem type, the area always will live inside. The perimeter, you're going to go X on the one side, the other side is going to be half the number they gave you minus X. If you understand where that came from, that's wonderful. If you're willing to memorize it, that will serve you just as well, at least for a couple days till you forget where it came from. But if you jot this down or take a picture of this, the 120 lives inside, the 44 is going to become a 22 minus an X because one of the other sides is X. Question about the picture draw? Then do it like the other one we did. Areas, how? How do we get areas? Multiply. So we need to multiply the X by its friend. So X multiplies its friend, and that equals 120. And then we're temporarily done with like new stuff that we've done today. Now this is like a little bit of a comfort zone. Question about the new. Okay. What do your algebra instincts tell you to do? Second problem in a row. Distribute. So 22x minus x squared. This would equal 120, but we'd rather it equal 0. So the 120 will go minus. That's a little bit awkward of a factoring problem for two reasons. Anybody have one reason why that's a little bit awkward of a factoring problem?
The number is bigger.
That's true, but that's not going to bother us, I don't think. Another reason why that's awkward for us right now?
It's because if 2x is in the middle.
Who's in the middle?
X
X squared.
The x squared's in the middle. We're used to the x squared being
on the left.
First.
first. So we could switch the order. I would recommend switching the order. But another thing that's still going to be awkward, if all we do is switch the order, how's the x squared also awkward?
So negative.
It's a negative. So I'm going to suggest we switch the order, and we also, while we're at it, switch the signs. And that's legal. If we switch some of the signs, that's only legal if we switch all of the signs. So I'm going to switch, switch, and switch. And also think about switching, but switching the sign of 0 is stupid. It'll just stay the same as it was. So I'm going to go positive x squared first, 22x middle, but now negative, 120 third, but now positive, and that looks more comfortable. Anybody remember the vocabulary for that when we get it? X squareds, then x's, then numbers like that? D word? Yeah, something with respect to x. Put this in blah 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 with respect to x.
Descending order.
Descending order. So this is now in descending order with respect to x. X squareds, then x's, then numbers with a sign switch. And it's factor time. The size of the numbers shouldn't bother us too much. Times tables, you have 120 in them. What's your only like 120 times tables?
12 and 10.
12 and 10. With this as a plus, the signs are
Or the same.
same, both minuses because of that. The 12, 10 work for 22?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 12, 10. This tells us that the x is
12.
12. And if the x, and I'm not even going to include that as my answer, if the x is 12, 22 minus 12, its friend would be 10. And in a strange twist, this tells us x is 10. And if x is 10, its friend would be 12. Do we need to write that all again? I'd say no. Just go with 12 and 10 are the sides of a rectangle. Because as I said, who cares who's who? A rectangle's perfect, doesn't matter. Question about that type. Then here's a flashback. Consecutive number stuff. So if I say to you, I have consecutive numbers, act like I didn't say odds for a second. If I say I have consecutive numbers, remember what we named them. We'll swatch an x.
X plus 1.
The next one would be x plus 1. If I wanted another one, we'd say x
Plus 2.
plus 2 and x
Plus 3.
plus 3 and so on and so forth. If I do consecutive evens, the first one is x. Who's its friend?
X plus
X plus 2. And then we go x plus 4, x plus 6, and so on. Consecutive odds. Memory of that. X for the first one,
X plus 2.
x plus 2 also for the second one. And if there were a third, we'd go x plus 4, x plus 6, x plus 8. Evens and odds generated the same list for us. So there's going to be a few in this homework that's going to work off of these lists of consecutive numbers. So as soon as it says consecutive odd, these are their names. We just need to remember that from a few chapters back. Product means to multiply, and that should equal a 99. Question about problem creation. And now we're in a comfort zone. Third problem in a row, you're first going to have to distribute x squared plus 2x. Third problem in a row, they should all equal
0.
0. So the 99 transferring
Negative.
is a minus. Then we factor xx, signs different, plus minus. 99 times tables,
33,
but we need 2 out of it. 11 and 9 will do the trick. Plus takes
The bigger one.
11, not in there. This gets me a
negative 11.
-11. But we're supposed to build a list. Who is -11's next odd up?
Negative 9.
-9. This would give me instead a +9. Who is next up?
11.
Those are both equally good. All of those numbers are odds. Negative numbers can also be odd. That's legal. Positive times positive makes positive. Negative times negative also makes positive. Both of those lists are equally valuable to us. No throwaways there. Question about those. Homework, was it 306 that I said before we started to record?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 306 is 1 to 9. Every problem will be one of these types. If you were good at these, look for the ones where it has area in it and then mention length and width. If you like these better, look for the ones that say area and perimeter. If you like this one better, look for the ones that say consecutive whatevers. But some of the consecutive will be odds, and it's this list. Some will be consecutive evens, and it'll be that list. But some might just say consecutive, and it would be the x plus 1 list. I think these are the easiest ones, personally, but they come at the end of the homework. Maybe you disagree with me, because maybe the consecutives freaked you out a few chapters ago. Maybe you're still freaked out, I don't know. But if you have patterns, if you're worried about it, either write down what we did or take a picture of this before you run. But every homework problem is going to fit one of these 3 patterns off of 306. Then next day we have a sheet, then a quiz, then the bigger sheet, then the test. That's like our next 5 days, is just wrapping this chapter up. And that's all I've got.